What an excellent day for an exorcism. What's up, everybody? Station, pop, pop, boo, it's Horrorfest. That's right. Welcome to PCP Movie Night as we continue the final week of Horrorfest 2024. And we are going to do one of the most anticipated franchise reviews that we've ever done, The Exorcist. That's right. All 6 films are going to be talked about tonight here on PCP Movie Night. You know we love our franchise reviews. We kicked off Horrorfest with a Paranormal Activity franchise review, and tonight we're diving into The Exorcist. And why I was so excited to do this show is because The Exorcist is such a legendary and universally acclaimed horror movie classic, right? That surely none of these sequels live up to the legacy of the first movie. And unlike every franchise we've ever done, and we've done plenty of franchises that decide to ignore certain parts of the continuity, right? We've seen this tons of time, whether it's Hellraiser or Halloween or Friday the 13th or anything like that. This franchise is set apart because none of the sequels recognize the other sequels. Like every sequel, every prequel is like a reboot attempt because maybe this is the movie that should never have had a franchise. Should be The Exorcist. I don't know. We're curious to know what you think out there in the chat tonight and the panel tonight. And this movie was so scary, so demented, so bloody, so transgressive that half the panel couldn't make it. Is that the work of Pazuzu or is that the work of the Holy Spirit? We shall decide. If it's the work of Pazuzu, we're the bold few that are here tonight for the panel. If it's the work of the Holy Spirit, we're the bold damned that are here on the panel. Speaking of damned and blessed, it's Verno from Blood Splatter Chatter. What is up, my man?
What up, man? I think it was the spirit of that Paranormal Activity franchise review that scared some of these people away. It was like, no, I'm good.
Hell yeah. You know, we love our franchise reviews, and I know you love doing them, man, and I always appreciate having you here for them, man.
Hell yeah. I love that you do them so that I get to do them. So thanks for having me, brother.
Absolutely, man. Super fun. And also to round out the panel, because like I said, half the panel wasn't able to be here. I'm not saying that this is a cursed film franchise. I'm not saying this is a cursed podcast, but maybe it is. But we got the cursed one himself. It's Brooks. What is up, my man?
I'll say it. This franchise is cursed. Like when I started watching this franchise, a little box popped up and said, "What a horrible night to have a curse." And I was like, that seems bad. I don't like that.
It's like I send you the list of Horrorfest, right? And you look at it and you see the Exorcist franchise at the bottom, and you're like the dude in The Mummy, Brooks, and you go, "Good heavens, what a terrible curse!" And you just open it up anyway. All right, we're going to dive right into it. We're going to give our thoughts and ratings on all 6 movies in the Exorcist franchise. And 2 of them are remakes of each other. It's so freaking weird. What a weird franchise. There's not a horror franchise like this one. There's really not. So I'm excited to unpack this. And let's unpack with the obvious one. The Exorcist, 1973, based on the William Peter Blatty novel. Screenplay by William Peter Blatty, and William Friedkin doing the directing because the producers really liked The French Connection, so they brought him on. Linda Blair, Ellen Burstyn, and what's the dude's name? Who plays Karis? Jason Miller. And what's the dude who plays
Max von Sydow?
Yeah, is that the guy that plays?
Yeah, the old Marin. Yeah.
Exorcist.
Okay, cool. Marin, what's crazy is that Marin is the common thread in almost all of these movies, but he doesn't seem to be the main character in this first film, right?
No.
Let's talk about it. There's my copy on Blu-ray right there. I have the extended director's cut that they finally released later on. I like this cut better because it does have the spider walk scene, and I'm not saying that the spider walk scene is worth it, but what I love about the scene or about this cut of the film is it has that extended bit at the end where the detective and the priest become friends, because that's the setup for Exorcist 3, which we'll be talking about. What can I say about this movie we've not already talked about, right? We covered this 1 and 2 and 3 on Dylan's Horror Show already, but we've never covered this series here, nor any of the movies individually. The Exorcist
is the first one, didn't we?
Did we do the first one? I think that's Dylan's horror show. I don't think we did it here.
I'm pretty sure we did it on this one, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe.
I don't know. We can. What's crazy is that when you do so many movie reviews, you forget what you've done. It's crazy, right? But The Exorcist is a damned classic, right? No pun intended. This movie is brilliant. It's amazing. 1973. You know what I'm saying? This is before like Suspiria and Halloween. This is before Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street. Horror movies were super cheesy. You know, if you look at the history of horror like I have, you got some good stuff here and there, but most of the time, pre-Exorcist, a lot of horror films were pretty bogus. And this was probably the biggest horror film that really fucked people up. It was controversial at the time that it was released. Linda Blair got death threats from ultra crazy Christians who thought that she was doing the work of the devil by bringing his work into the world and shit like that. We're in the midst of the satanic panic, right? Like that's going to even just keep elaborating and building up into something bigger and grander in the late 70s and throughout the 80s, right? This is the stuff that we grew up with. The Exorcist was the movie that terrified me as a kid. Like whenever it would come on TV, whenever my parents would be watching it, this was the one I could not watch. Any Freddy movie, any Jason movie, anything that they put on the TV, I could watch. But there were two things I could not watch. The Exorcist and the Thriller music video. For some reason, those two things terrified me. And I remember not watching this movie at all from when I was a single-digit child until they released this extended cut. They released this extended cut like in 98, 99, 2000. I remember I worked at the movie theater when it released, and it was a big deal. I felt like I was confronting my fears. And then that night, I remember telling everybody, this movie's not as scary as I remember it. It's kind of funny, right? But on the rewatch that we did, I thought it was on DHS, maybe it was on PCP, but on that rewatch, like I was really surprised at the nuance of this film, right? Now, obviously I saw this film as a kid and didn't see it again until the snobby Robbie phase of my late teens, early 20s. So I wasn't really on board with the slow, deliberate, methodical, and measured pace of this film, right? But in recent years, I do accept that. I do think that this movie is absolutely brilliant. I think it is a wonderful exploration of faith. I think it's got great character work. It is a possession movie, but it's not about the possession. This movie, more so than that, is about the relationship between a mother and a daughter and a father and a mother, right? Like the father Karras stuff as an adult really hits me way harder than anything else in this film. I think the film is brilliant. The music, the use of tubular bells in particular, turned what is a very elaborate, but also if you listen to the whole piece, very positive and uplifting piece of music, it turned it into a satanic classic. I love The Exorcist. I think it's amazing. It stands the test of time. It is the giant with the shoulder that other horror films post 1973 are standing on, right? This movie is brilliant. It's a classic for a reason. Great performances, a great direction, a great score, based on a great book from what I hear. I've never read the book, but Verno, you've read the book. What do you think about The Exorcist overall?
Well, first, since you reminded me of it, I think a lot of people would assume that the book is going to be like slower and more of like a slog to get through, and it's not. It's really entertaining and kind of a breeze to read. But I mean, this is kind of the movie that I use as an example when I'm talking about, oh, I'm not going to give this a 5 because it's not The Exorcist. It's not, you know what I mean? It's one of the handful of movies that's on the Mount Rushmore, almost inarguably. And just like you, I'm interested in the history of horror big time. And before this, there's classics. There's like badass horror movies, but this is like the first unquestionable like step into the modern world for horror. There's like Psycho in 1960, there's Night of the Living Dead in 68, and Rosemary's Baby. Before, there's not really another one that you could put in the same category as like a movie like this. But kind of the same as what you were saying. Not that I was afraid of it when I was a kid. It was too slow for me. Like I remember like I could never get into this movie when I was a kid. It was too long, too slow, and it didn't get to it. And honestly, even on this watch, I was like, damn, it is like the first 43 minutes. There's not a lot going on. But that's one of the cool things about it is like the way that it escalates the scares. And like they spend like literally like an hour and 20, an hour and a half of this movie just trying to discredit everything else, just trying to rule out all the things that it couldn't be other than demonic possession. But I remember when I watched it for the first time in 20 years for DHS, it scared the shit out of me. Like that night, it didn't scare me when I just watched it for this rewatch, but it is still definitely like one of the scariest movies that you can watch. The Ellen Burstyn performance is what you talked about, Jason Miller, and appreciating him more now. For me, it's like I forget like how much of like almost the main character to this movie she is. There's not that real clear-cut main character, but in a lot of ways, she's the emotional core. And then she disappears at the end of the movie, and they give it to Jason Miller and them. But it's as elevated as a horror movie that you can have, but it's also still super fucking gnarly. When Reagan starts doing the bits with the crucifix and he like peeing on the floor, that makes me so uncomfortable. That's like just such gnarly over the top bits that are still comparable to like anything you'll see in a Terrifier movie as far as like just super gnarly bits on stage. And her peeing on the floor, I don't know. Oh, the medical bit, her squirting the blood out of her neck is like still like super squirmy.
Yeah, but, and they repeat that medical bit so well in Believer,
yeah,
dude, which I know we're gonna get to. And Believer hit me in a way because someone I'm very close with was pregnant when I first watched Believer. Luckily, the baby is delivered healthy. She's an amazing, healthy baby who is now 8 months old. So hell yeah! But having a young child in your life recontextualizes The Exorcist, man. It really does, because it is about the concern of a mother and a young daughter. But then I love the juxtaposition of the son with the older mother. Like that's a really interesting dichotomy that's being played in this movie, and how our familial relationships, they educate or define at times, or inform, I should say, our way to deal with faith.
Right. It makes you more vulnerable in certain situations that they come across in the movie. Yeah, definitely, man.
Yeah. So you love the film.
It's one of the best.
You agree with everybody.
Yeah, I agree with everybody. Exorcist, 2 thumbs up.
All right. What about you, Brooks? Do you agree with everybody? What do you think about The Exorcist?
Well, I remember I watched The Exorcist actually when I was a teenager. I think it was like in high school when I first watched it. And like, when I first watched it, I was like, man, this movie is boring as fuck, because the buildup takes so long to get to the, to the good stuff. But I remember really liking and like kind of being freaked out a little bit by the, the possession stuff later on. And like, rewatching it, I think I appreciate more the slow buildup to it, like how it does take its time to like, establish, how this woman's life is, and like how this like demon is like just completely wrecking everything. And like I also kind of appreciate the slow buildup of, the exorcism. Like, she doesn't just immediately start doing like, puking up pea soup and twisting her head around. She starts off kind of like just being an asshole, and the whole like telling people you're going to die and shit like that, and gradually it just gets like more and more crazy, and she gets more fucked up. Like I love the makeup, the Pazuzu makeup in this movie. And like I love the like Linda Blair's like expressions in that makeup is what really makes Pazuzu for me, I think. Like I love that. Like my favorite parts of Pazuzu are just when he does the stare. You just like you see his eyes, like like he's not saying anything. He's not like being his normal crude self. He's just he's just giving the stink eye. But yeah, this movie is great. It does feel like it takes a little too long at times. Like I think all of these movies are a bit too long. Like they're all almost 2 hours, and I think that's a little like. But this movie, I think it's more justified than the other ones. But still, I feel like it drags a little bit.
That's
but I kind of get
point in the Paranormal Activity column for the runtime.
Yeah,
give that edge to Paranormal Activity franchise.
Oh yeah, they're shorter, but they feel longer to me, man.
And there's more of them. There's this one. I was like, oh shit, there's only 6, but they're all 2 hours long.
They still have the same running time, right? I absolutely adore this film. I see I see you, Fable, out there in the chat being like, is this the first elevated horror film? You must have missed the whole conversation last night on The Mummy. We were talking about they've been making elevated horror films since the 20s and the 30s. And it's a bullshit thing to say that because I hate elevated horror, not you, Fable, but I hate the term elevated horror because that's a newish term and it's meant to define newish movies. And that's some bullshit because don't forget what came before, like The Exorcist, like Deep Red, like Suspiria, like fuck, man. There's so many elevated horror movies. If you really want to go, what does that even fucking mean?
The Changeling, The Shining, Rosemary's Baby.
Exactly.
Exorcist.
Like it just means I can be pretentious about my era of horror films by calling it elevated. All right, let's kick off the rating for The Exorcist. You out there in the chat, let me know, what do you give it out of 5 possible you digs? I'm going to kick us off. 5 you digs. I mean, what else can I say about The Exorcist? This is a perfect horror film. It is super rewatchable. It does have a slow pace to it, but as I age and as I learn more about life, love, and elevation, I actually appreciate the pace of this movie even more. So 5 digs for me. What do you think, Verno?
Just on the pace, like it's a slow burn and it escalates slowly, but the 2-hour runtime flies by. Like it's not like it's like a slow movie. You know, you get what I'm saying. And the other thing I want to say about it is that this is kind of where we get. I looked into it a little bit. I tried to Google around to see if I was correct in this statement, but this is really what like sets the tone for how demons behave in cinema. They talk shit and they're kind of funny. Like we wouldn't have Evil Dead and the types of demons that like taunt you and say hilarious things without Reagan talking about what happened to or what your cunting daughter did and things like that. So it really did like it set the, you know, it's probably the most influential horror movie ever, or definitely one of them in the top 5. But obviously, it's an easy 5. I said it before, the godfather of horror movies. It's just like the gold standard for 70s horror cinema.
What's crazy is that a lot of people in the chat are giving it less than a 5. So that's going to be interesting to see how this develops over the course of the franchise. What about you, Brooks? What do you give The Exorcist?
Well, like I kind of feel like, you know, I kind of felt like, you know, it was a 4.5, but at the same time, like that doesn't feel right either. Like I feel like I should give this one a 5 just because of, you know, it is such a classic movie, and like, you know, it's kind of a beginning of like, you know, a certain genre of horror movies. So yeah, I'll take the 0.5 thing into account for Horrorfest, and I'll give this one a 5.
All right.
You know, and like, you know, everything in it works really well. Like the soundtrack is really good. You know, Tubular Bells, of course, is like a very classic. And I wish they'd used it more. Like they didn't hardly use it in the first movie.
They barely use it in this franchise. It's like,
yeah, I think like they just used it that scene where she's walking home.
Like there must have been something going on because that's not an original composition for this movie, right? So there must be something with rights where, like, I don't know what it is with these films where they don't want to do that fucking music, and I'm just like, you're idiots. You're idiots. That is the fucking. Could you imagine being like, we're gonna do a Halloween movie, but we're not gonna use the John Carpenter thing?
Yeah,
get the fuck out of here. You're ridiculous. You're ridiculous, man.
Ridiculous, and I won't stand for it.
Yeah, no shit. That's some ridiculous shit as the name Captain Howdy for a demon to decide to pick, right? Tubular Bells is the shit. Jelani, be careful what you say about Exorcist 2 because she was 17 years old when she made that movie. But I understand.
I Googled it, bro. I fucking made goddamn sure she was 18 to 19 years old during the process.
Oh, okay. Then it's all good. Exorcist Never mind. 2. No, Jelani, you're right. You're right.
Fair game.
Speaking of, how about this? Exorcist 2. And I love that the official title is John Boorman's film of Exorcist 2, The Heretic. So this is known as one of the worst movie sequels of all time. And I would have always told you that it is. I do think it has great music, right? Like its theme is really fucking good. But they shy away from the Tubular Bell stuff. They bring Linda Blair's Reagan back. Helen Bernstein's not there. They do this weird psychological bit where they can use light flashes to get in each other's head and share the same memories.
Machine.
The synchronizer, right?
Level,
like what the fuck, dude, does that even mean? There's a lot of shit confusing about this movie. I want to tell you something. This was the first time in my life that I watched this movie and enjoyed it. I legitimately enjoyed this movie this time. It's not good, and it is boring, and it is overwrought. But man, I found myself transfixed by all the stuff with Mirren, right? And James Earl Jones' character, all the African stuff, like going up the cliffs, the wave, or not the waves, but the wind, and like the fucking sound design in this movie really blew me away this time. There are elements about this movie that I find very fascinating, but the most fascinating thing about it is how they shit the bed so fucking hardcore making this movie, right? Nobody wanted this movie to be made. Nobody that was making this movie felt like they wanted this movie to be made, right? Linda Blair says, oh, it was a great script, but it's not the movie we made. You know, there's a lot of problems with this movie. But this time watching it, I enjoy, like, I usually get really pissed off about this movie, but there was something that was transfixing to me this watch, and all of it involved the backstory of Father Marin in Africa with the kid who grew up to become the doctor, the locust shit. There's something about that I think this movie tried to do too much with not enough, right? But I, for the first time in my life, will say this movie doesn't suck. I think it's all right. What about you, Vernon? What do you think about The Heretic?
This was the first time that I had seen it. I watched it after, I think we reviewed Exorcist on DHS those years ago. And I'd heard it was terrible and everything, but I kind of enjoyed it the first time too. It has the moment, like there's so many things about it where I hate it and I like it at the same time. Like the light bit, like get on my level, and it's obviously really stupid, but I kind of like
all
it.
that shit is so
It's so stupid. Linda Blair, she is extreme. Her looks aside, she is super, super cute in this movie, but she's super charming too. Not the greatest performance, in my opinion. It's pretty bad, but she's really, really, really cute and really, really like super charming. I agree. The African stuff I do like. The like visually, especially, people make fun of it. I hear people make fun of the moth bit all the time, but I think it looks really cool. Like it's a vibe when they're in Africa. And the other thing that I really like about it is the scene. It's with the light bit where like Reagan is, she's like rubbing her titty, the doctor's titty. Like I don't know, like we see like possessed Reagan, and it's like it's fucking.
It's like something... a 5-minute scene. She's just like
so. Especially the first time I saw it, I was like, whoa! Like I remember being really like I don't know, impressed visually by that moment. I thought it was super fucking creepy. But for me, like the worst part is just it falls apart towards the end. You just like you really don't care by the end. And it's like I don't know. There's like 2 Reagans at one point. Like I don't know what the hell's going on. For large,
it's rather confusing, is it not?
Yeah, it's really hard to follow, and I think that's the biggest problem with it is that by the end of it, you're not sure what the fuck is going on, or at least I'm not. But it's I don't think it's as bad as a lot of people say, but it's bad. It's not great, but it's not the worst.
I would say the same thing, and it is a bad movie, but it's not as bad as people are letting. Like it's not that bad. Like it's not unwatchable. Like this is a movie that has some fascinating bits for me, and there was something I was gonna say, and I can't remember it right now, so I'll just throw it to Brooks while I remember that. Go ahead. What do you think about this? Was your first watch, by the way, on every single Exorcist film outside of the first one?
Yeah, I'd only seen the first one before, so all of them are new for me from this point. And this movie, like I know people like talk about it, but it's not that bad. It's not good. But I mean, they're much worse. I think this movie, there are the seeds or the potential for a good movie in it, but it feels like they just kind of like, weren't able to reach it. It's like, I think like if they could have like maybe a different cut may have been able to make this movie, maybe not like, better than the first, but, at least something that most people would consider a good movie. I think it does have like some interesting aspects. I like that they're trying to dig into like, the history. This is the only movie where they actually say Pazuzu's name in the entire franchise. Like they never mention it again that I can remember.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's like it was never mentioned in the first movie either, oddly enough. But that's what he was supposed to be.
Yeah, we just put it together because of the statue, right?
Yeah, like the lion statue with the eagle wings. That's that's just what Pazuzu's supposed to be. But Yeah, like it does have it just doesn't feel like it flows correctly to me. Like it feels kind of confusing at times, and like the concepts are like, what kind of world is this where they have like fucking like hypnotizing telepathy machines and shit? But I did like the fact that the priest is like, instead of seeing it as like dark magic or whatever, he's like, oh, this is like a new way to like he actually has a kind of a positive thing about like this is going to change the world for the better.
This is a miracle, right?
Yeah, he believes it'll bring people closer to God. I think that I like that part of it. It makes the priest character seem a little more human and less because like a lot of characters who are like that, who have that kind of religious bent to them, if they were confronted with like something like this, would be like very like, oh, this is like dark magic or whatever, But he seems to think it's more he sees it more of a positive light. So yeah, I think this movie.
I was gonna say I like how he just jumps in at one point and throws that headset on like he's done it a million times. Like, send me in, I'm gonna go after her. Like he's done it. Like
he loves using the machine. Like, the priest is like, oh, this machine's the shit, dude.
It's like the first time a person plays the Virtual Boy and he's like, send me back in. I can beat it this time.
Virtual Mario Golf. I'm on the 18th hole. Damn it, Pazuzu's trying to block my ball. But yeah, this movie, I think it could have been good, but it just, I can see why people don't like it. But like to say it's like, a horrible movie, I think is like, it's a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, I think that's a bit of a stretch too. But talking about that priest, he's going through the same crisis of faith type thing, right? Mm-hmm. But man, what a dumbass. How many times in this movie does he tell people, I rode through the winds with the demon Pazuzu? And I'm like, no, bro, you just fucked everything up. Don't tell people that you're like fucking rocking with the fucking demon. What do you fucking think they're going to how do you think they're going to react to that, man? That being said, this movie wasn't as bad this time when I watched it, but it's still not a good movie. But I'll give it the highest score I would ever give it in my lifetime right now, which is a 2.5 out of 5. You digs. You out there in the chat, what do you give Exorcist 2, The Heretic? What about you, Verno?
I don't have much more to add to it other than I will give it a 2. This was the third movie that I watched, by the way. I watched these. I started with the prequels, and then after I got through those, instead of just jumping into The Exorcist, I'm like, all right, I'm a glutton for punishment right now. I'm gonna go for like the worst ones first. So this was number 3, and not as bad as I thought it would be. So a 2.
All right. What about you, Brooks? What are you sitting on? Why do I have to think so hard about your name, man? I don't know.
It's the haircut.
Yeah, you don't recognize me anymore. I'd give this movie. Honestly, I was kind of thinking like 2.5, 2, but I think I give it a 3. It's all right. Like I think it's a movie I'd consider like giving a rewatch. But it does fall way short, especially compared to the first movie.
That's the problem.
And, yeah. But like I said, I think like it had the potential to be something good, and it does have like it's worth watching, kind of just for the lore alone. Like you learn more about Pazuzu in this movie than you do in most of the other movies. Like you get a little bit of his backstory, and like his conflict with the priest, Father Marin.
Yeah.
Or Father Marin.
Yeah.
Harris was the second one, right?
Yeah.
Harris is
the dark-haired fellow. Yeah.
So 3.
All right.
Probably more generous, but than it deserves. But I think.
So far, it seems like us on the panel are rating these films higher than the chat.
Yeah.
But a 2.5 from me, a 2 from Verno, and a 3 from Brooks, which means that I was right because the average is 2.5 out of the 3 there. So it's pretty dope. Anyway, this movie was so bad and so universally panned that they didn't do anything else with this franchise for 13 years. Now, William Peter Blatty and William Friedkin had pitched a movie sequel to The Exorcist. They didn't want to be involved in The Heretic, but then they were like, after The Heretic's flop, they were like, we got an idea. They didn't agree to do it. William Peter Blatty went and wrote a novel based on that called Legion, right? So Legion is the official sequel to The Exorcist in book form, right? But also in movie form, and that's The Exorcist 3. The Exorcist 3 is one of, if not the greatest psychological thriller of the 90s. A question that we asked tonight to everybody. Do these sequels live up to the original? And that's got to be hard to do because we're not just talking about a good, solid movie. We're talking about one of the legendary films in horror cinema history. None of these can live up to the original, right? Untrue. I think Exorcist 3 is as good, if not slightly better than the original. I love this fucking movie. And I'm going to tell you what, I'm about to reverse a reverse that I did when I reversed it last time. Here we go. This is the greatest psychological thriller of the 90s. And what does that mean? It means it's a bullshit term, psychological thriller, just like elevated horror. It's a bullshit term for people to say horror movie without feeling dirty or feeling like they're going to be judged. I don't give a shit. I'll say horror movie. I love it. I live my life this way. Exorcist 3 is probably my favorite of the franchise. Why? Because this really gets to the root of faith. This really gets to the root of a loss of faith, not by some priest. How many of us can relate to a priest? How many of us can relate to a mother whose daughter is possessed by the devil? Well, a few of us maybe, but like, you get what I'm saying. Like, I can relate to George C. Scott in this film. I can relate to the priest in this film, not the priest who shows up at the end to do the exorcism just to die. That was something forced in. There is a Legion cut here, right? And I do think the Legion cut has. Did you watch the Legion cut?
No,
Verno?
but I kind of know what it is. It doesn't have Brad Dourif in it, and it doesn't have that exorcism at the end.
So it has the more subdued ending that I like, but if you take Brad Dourif out of this movie, it doesn't hit as well. Brad Dourif is a fucking revelation in this movie. His performance is top notch. George C. Scott is so freaking awesome. And him and his best friend, the father, and I love that in the extended cut of The Exorcist, it sets this up, right? Hey, do you like the pictures? Let's go see a movie, right? And they have a friendship that is so odd couple, so funny, so genuine, and so charming that I would have loved to see a whole. In fact, if you read Ultimate Spider-Man right now, J. Jonah Jameson and Uncle Ben are those two characters, right? Like, and it works so well. It's so intense, such a great story. One of the best scares we ever get when the fucking person comes out after the nurse with the big fucking brain shears or whatever. Like, that has gone down as one of the best jump scares, so excellently crafted and executed. I fucking love this movie. I will always stand by this. Exorcist 3 is one of the best movies that most people don't recognize. What about you, Verno? What do you think?
Totally, man. I agree. I love the shit out of it, and I enjoyed it. I think this is probably my third time watching. I think I enjoyed it even more this time, and I will blame. Like I said, I watched The Exorcist last after watching all these, and right after Exorcist 3. And I think that's why I did not. It wasn't the best Exorcist viewing for me, because right after 3's like punchier and it's a little quicker to the point and it's a little bit shorter. It's maybe a little bit more entertaining. But you said it with Brad Dourif. I love what they're doing. Like, I love, and I kind of like wonder what it would have sounded like if they didn't keep messing with his voice. You know, they keep taking him an octave down, and then at one point they're bringing him an octave up and everything. And it's like,
I fucking love that shit, though.
I wonder why they did it. Like, what made them do that?
And make it sound demonic, like a motherfucker, and make it sound like Legion, different voies,
right?
Different demons, different people, right? That's why they did that, dude.
It's super.
This
cool.
movie's better than even you think, man.
I really appreciate I don't always love the investigation portion of a movie, like the procedural bit of it. And to me, I love it so much. And what's so impressive about these performances is a lot of what you're getting are these long exposition scenes. And it's like, to pull that off and make it not feel like you're getting long exposition scenes is crazy. George C. Scott, I'm surprised he didn't die on set. Quiet. Just like the way, when he turns around and yells at people, you're like, oh my God. Like, why he
yells so fucking much in this movie? And it's funny, but it's also very real, dude, right? This is the dude who is losing it right?
Yeah.
Because he just lost his best friend. He's dealing with these horrible murders. Like just the way he describes what happened to the boy, right? In the beginning, like, and it just keeps getting worse and worse. And
He's got that carp in his fucking tub. I mean, this guy
Ew.
is having a rough week. That carp, I can't go home. It's so silly. Like, it's so silly. Like him and Dyer together, who Dyer is one of the priests in the first one. He's the one playing the pianos, who I think is a queer-coded priest. That's my theory on Dyer. I think they couldn't come out and say it, but if you read between the lines, I'm pretty sure it's there.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I do, and like I love like what they're doing, like with the way the Gemini killer is going about the killings, and like and again, we're not seeing this stuff, we're just hearing about it, but like the descriptions of what he's doing, and then we do see it at the end with the exorcism. But that's bad. You mentioned the Shears bit, which is like, you know, that's the iconic scare from this movie and one of the iconic bits from the whole franchise. That's super dope. And just to think like, this is William Peter Blatty's like what, second or third? He did the 9th configuration before this as a director. And
which, by the way, we maybe should have included that, but it's not Exorcist a name. But the Exorcist trilogy, the perfect Exorcist trilogy for anybody out there, is the Exorcist, 9th configuration, and Exorcist 3.
Totally.
That shit works so well.
Totally. But the way I look at that is like, all right, William Peter Blatty is going to do a slasher kill scene in his movie, and it's just like, that's what he did. That's such a cool slasher kill scene in your movie. And then the last thing I'll say on it is the other bit with the Shears, when George C. Scott goes home, which that's the bit that reminds me of Longlegs, how there's like people out there doing his bidding and under their control by these things. But anyway, like when the girl is getting pulled away from the Shears, like in slow motion, almost cutting her head off. Like, I don't know, it looks weird because of the slow-mo, but it's also like really, really, really cool. So yeah, a badass movie, man.
That another really creepy fucking part to me is that old woman like scurrying across the fucking ceiling and shit like that, dude. I fucking love this movie. And anybody else would have made this movie and made it so dumb and cheesy. Dude. Old people slashing, they would have showed it all right. I love the subdued nature and the focus on the human element of this, right? That's totally what I love.
And the relationship between the characters. I'm glad you said that, because to compare it to a movie that I know you're not the biggest fan, although you're a little bit bigger fan than you recall, but to compare it to Dr. Sleep, that Dr. Sleep is what you get when you let the super creative original writer write the sequel to his shit, instead of like somebody trying to remake The Shining and just make another version of it. Something like really creative. And like, you would have never came up with, like, somebody that wasn't William Peter Blatty would have came up with the script and they would have been like, no, that's not Exorcist-y enough. We're not going to do that. But he did something really, really different with it.
Yeah. The only fault I have with this movie is the studio did force the bit where there's the priest that's not connected to any of the rest of the story, who just randomly, for some reason, I guess, is connected to Pazuzu or whatever, and decides to like come and do his exorcism, even though it doesn't work. Like, it doesn't change the fucking movie, whatever. And I know that the original cut has like a more subdued ending that may have fit a little bit more appropriately, but I actually love that, like, the firework ending of this movie. What about you, Brooks? First time watching The Exorcist 3, do not disappoint me. What did you think?
Well, I liked it pretty well. I liked it better than 2, certainly. It does take a different direction. I think, like, you know, if it hadn't been for them slapping the Exorcist title on this, it could have worked as like a murder mystery, or like a psychological murder mystery, kind of like, you know, because you wouldn't know that it was a demon behind it.
Yeah, and William Peter Blatty, by the way, wanted to call this movie Legion, which was the name of the book, but the studio, of course, was like, no, we can't do that. And then they were like, well, we have to have an exorcism. It's called The Exorcist. And he's like, I didn't call it The Exorcist, you dipshit.
It feels like, you know, it does feel like, you know, the whole demonic thing was kind of forced in, and like, instead of, but in this case, I guess it's the killer, the Brad Dourif killer, who's the like possessor instead of Pazuzu. And it's kind of like mentioned, I think they kind of hint at it when, you know, when Brad Dourif and the priest are like, you know, having that conversation in the cell, which is one of the best parts of the movie. Like, anytime that Brad Dourif is talking is like, it's so great. It's like he kind of mentions like that he has a higher master. He kind of hints that, you know, maybe Pazuzu is somehow like tied into him, you know, existing on this plane.
He mentions it's his master.
He's in there with him. That's the way I read it. Like,
there are many. He's one of the many right? Like the Gemini killer is eventually like impresses Pazuzu, right? And uses his death, takes his soul on the way to hell to place it into Father Karras, which that's a really great. Anybody that's confused, physically, that's Father Karras. He's still alive because he's possessed by Pazuzu and many others, right? It's not just Pazuzu. There's many others there, including the Gemini killer.
Right.
A lot of people get confused by that because of the way it's shot.
They even mention like him having to crawl out of the grave and everything, which is a cool visual.
Yeah, I think this movie could have worked like as a kind of a psychological mystery if it hadn't had that title, because you could be wondering like if George C. Scott's character is just like he's so stressed out by his job and like all the things going wrong in his life that maybe the whole thing is just it's just all in his head, or something like that. But because it's got the Exorcist title, it's a demon or a possession of some kind.
Yeah.
But George C. Scott, he's great in this movie. I love whenever he throws like one of his old band tantrums, because it reminds me of my grandpa when he'd get mad and he'd yell at me. It's like that's George C. Scott. Like in all of his movies, he's been like that. He has that distinctive kind of temper flare up, and that always has made me think of like that's kind of how I see like the typical old man getting angry. So yeah,
I would say this is George C. Scott's greatest performance. I would go that fucking far. And Fable, you better be fucking careful. You're about to cross some lines. You're about to lose that wrench, man. You better be careful. I don't know. He just threw 3 yawns. Is that what that is? 3 yawns? Get the fuck out of here, Fable. What's wrong with you?
Well, I see your 3 like rectangles.
You must be on the wrong brand computer.
You got to upgrade your server. All right. I'm happy with the discussion so far. Very famously on DHS when we covered this, I think it was Fable and maybe was it Steph as well? Like I don't know. So, like there was too many people to me not understanding the awesomeness of this movie that it started getting. It was like a funhouse situation, Brooks, that was going on. But I would tell you this: Exorcist 3 way better than Funhouse. Right? I fucking love this movie. I'm gonna give it a 5. You digs? Like I say. I think I may even like this movie more than the original. Just saying this. Anytime The Exorcist is on, I can watch it. But I will seek out Exorcist 3. This movie is so fucking good. It is those performances. And I think if there's any bit of nuance about the whole exploration and theme of faith and loss of faith and the redemption of faith in The Exorcist, if there's any bit of that that's lost in that movie, none of that is lost in Exorcist 3. 5 you digs for me. What do you think, Verna? And you out there in the chat, go ahead. Fable, watch yourself. Watch yourself.
I'm tempted to give it like a super enthusiastic 4, or maybe like a 4 1/4. But I'll go ahead and it's Horrorfest. I'll go a 4.5 because on this rewatch, it really did is comparable to the first one as far as like entertainment value, like from start to finish. Just to throw a couple negatives in there, some of the speeches, although part of it, if I had a better attention span, I don't think this would be the case, but they can be a little long. Like the monologues can go a little long, and sometimes I'll dip in and out of my attention a little bit. The other thing is, and it's more annoying because my wife has been rewatching fucking Gilmore Girls. So I don't know if you guys have ever had Gilmore Girls on, but the way that they talk to each other and they go back and forth and they're talking like that is the way that Father Dyer and George C. Scott talk to each other. They're like the inspiration for the Gilmore Girls style of.
Well, it's like it's an Aaron Sorkin, Kevin Williamson kind of dialogue, man. I love that.
Yeah,
shit,
yeah.
man.
Joss Whedon, kind of. Yeah, for sure. Don't get me wrong.
Even early Kevin Smith, man.
It's cool. Yeah, it's cool and it's funny, but it's like it's in some ways it's the way people talk. That's what Gilmore Girls is going for. I feel like the way a mother and a daughter, like real friends, would talk. But at some points, it just seems like so unnatural and a little too polished and crisp, and it's just it's so weird, but it's entertaining all the time. But it does stand out to me, and I think about it a lot while it's happening, so I'll ding it for that. But it's great, man. I love your enthusiasm for the movie has helped me really appreciate the banger that it is over the years. But I really do
all
love
right.
it.
So what did you say, a 4.5? Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
Okay. What about you, Brooks? What are you sitting on?
Yeah, I like this movie, but I don't like it as much as you do. I'd probably give this one a solid 4. Like it is good, and I would consider watching it again. But I don't think it holds the candle to the first one. Like it is a different kind of movie, but I just don't like. I think it just sits in the 4 zone for me. Possibly a 4.5. Maybe on the rewatch, but this time I was feeling 4.
That's where I was. I gave it a 4 my first time. I like it more the more watches.
Yeah, I guarantee you'd give it a 4.5 the next time you watch it. So you just wait. We'll cover this individually one day. I fucking love this movie. I really do. All right. And then there wasn't an Exorcist movie for a long time. And now we're about to get into some weird shit. So they made a prequel to The Exorcist. Then the studio goes, oh, we made a mistake. Let's hire a new director, some new writers, and even some new actors, and let's redo this same movie. And then they put that movie out. That movie didn't do so well. So then they put out the fucking first one they made to begin with. Like this, I don't think this has ever happened in cinema history. Like we have shit like the Snyder Cut. We have shit like director's cuts of movies, but we've never seen 2 vastly different yet similar takes on the same initial idea. So we're going to kick it off in release order with 2004's Exorcist: The Beginning. So this one is done by Rennie Harlin, who did I think like Die Hard 2. Didn't he do Die Hard 2? He did a bunch of like some of the cheesier action films that we've discussed here on the channel. Verno's looking up for me as I continue on here. I remember watching this movie when it first released, and I remember hating Exorcist: The Beginning. What you got, Verno?
Die Hard 2, Cliffhanger, Deep Blue Sea, The Long Kiss Goodnight. He might have. He was involved in the newest.
One of Jelanie's favorite movies. There you go, right there.
People hated the newest Strangers, and he did that.
Cutthroat Island. Yeah, that was like a big financial loss, right?
Bricklayer.
So
whatever that is.
That being said, when I watched this movie for the first time, when it released, I remember watching this in theaters and hating it, shitting all over it, being done with it, right? This was the second time I've seen this film. I kind of like this movie, y'all. It doesn't hold a candle to the original at all. It's not a character study. It's not a super focused film, I would say, on character. This movie is, and I hear the reason why they remade Dominion into Exorcist: The Beginning was because it wasn't bloody enough and it didn't have that horror feel. And I've heard people ding this movie for feeling like a mid-2000s horror movie, but that's what they were trying to do. But whatever, right? Does it belong in this franchise? I don't fucking know. Did I have a fucking blast watching this movie? Yes. There was something about it. The kills, the fucking kid getting torn apart by the fucking hyena.
The hyenas.
I fucking love that shit, right? The fucking chick being revealed as the demon at the end and saying crazy shit like her juicy ass. Like, what the fuck is this movie? This is a movie that is so dumb that it's good. It's funny. This is a movie that's fun for me to watch. It's, to me, the funnest of the Exorcist films. I had a lot of fun with this, man. I think Stellan Skarsgård does a great job as an early Marin. I actually like this better than the next one that we'll be talking about, which is this movie's a remake of that one. I don't know, but I like Exorcist: The Beginning. I really was surprised by that because I was dreading watching this movie. I bought it because it was like $10 on Amazon.
I saw you have them all. You have Believer too. I love it.
Yeah, so I bought this because it was only $10. I was like, sure, I can. If I get I'm that dude. Like, if I like a band, I want every single thing they have. You know what I'm saying? If I like a franchise, I want every single movie in that franchise, right? And Exorcist: The Beginning is fun, dumb, bullshit, stupidity for me. But I love the gore. I love the fucking dude who's in Snatch, and he's the narrator of Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. He's the really like fucking nasty dude who winds up getting like
the fucked up face.
Yeah, and he keeps getting the fucked up face, right? Like you recognize that voice, right? From Lock, Stock, and Snatch, right? I love that character. I love Stellan Skarsgård in this movie. I love Chick's side boob. I fucking love this movie. I think it's great, dude. I really did like it. I liked it. What about you, Verna? What are you thinking?
This was, as I said, this was the first one that I watched. And I'm like 20 minutes into it. And I'm like, fuck, man, maybe it's not too late to get out of this Exorcist franchise review. I was struggling. But I think one of the biggest things for me is if I had watched the following movie, the one that we're going to review after this, if I had watched it first, it for me was easier to follow. So I could tell the story. Maybe it was because I watched this one, which is the same story, but there was something about this first one that like it was, I don't know, it was harder for me to focus and pay attention to what the fuck I was supposed to care about. There was a lot of elements going on. And the one thing I put in my notes is less than the sum of its parts. There's a lot of cool shit in the movie. Like you said, like now knowing the backstory where they said there wasn't enough horror, we need to add way more horror into this movie. You totally see it. And if those set pieces happened to characters that we cared about, I thought it would have like been really, really, really entertaining. But to me, that's what it felt like. It felt like a super hollow movie where like it was all studio and everything was stripped away from it. All the character development was gone. And then you mentioned when the girl at the end, when she gets possessed, to me, I was like, who the fuck is this Reagan cosplayer all of a sudden? Her makeup looked too Reagan-y. She looked like they designed her makeup for the lighting that was going on in the bedroom in 1973 and not for however they lit her in this. So that was, but the actress that played her leading up to that was really good. And there was a lot of really good performances. The set pieces were gnarly, but it was just a mess. It was all over the place. So I didn't know what to make of this movie. And like I said, this is the one, this is the first one I watched. So it's the hardest one for me to even remember, especially because I watched the remake right after that. So it's a bit of a blur, but I took some pretty good notes so I know what to score at least.
Well, this is actually the remake of that movie, which is so fucking weird, right? Yeah. Like it's so weird. Like anybody that doesn't know, they were making the prequel to The Exorcist. They didn't like it. They made this one. It didn't do well, so they released the fucking one. Like it's such like this has never happened before. Right. This is our chance as film lovers to see two different movies by two different, or the same movie by two different teams of production.
That's why I said, like, this is very interesting for a study and to look at, like, oh, that's what studio interference looks like. It's a really good example of, like, they saw this, they didn't like it, and they made it that. That's what studios don't like, and this is what they do like.
Apparently, I like the rock and roll aspect of this one. No, I don't fucking know. What about you, Brooks? What do you think about Exorcist, the beginning?
It's all right. This movie does feel to me like a little bit hollow. Like, I like the idea, the subject matter is, it seems like they're trying to explore more into Father Merrin's past, and like, his sins. Like, I like, the story of how, like, he was in, I guess, was he in Germany or was he in Italy?
He was somewhere that was at least occupied by the Germans.
Yeah. Like, I assume it was Italy, but maybe it was like Germany or somewhere else in Europe. But like, I like this idea that he was forced to, make this decision, and like, that sin like weighs heavy on him, and it kind of sets up this like the conflict between him and the demon Pazuzu early on, like, that they have this kind of history.
You mentioned that scene. One of the things I like about this movie versus Dominion, which we'll talk about eventually, is Dominion starts by just showing you that scene. I like the build up to the revelation of that scene, because I like the idea of like, why did Mirren leave the church for a time? That's interesting, because we know that he comes back, so like, I love that. Like,
I like the attention grabbing opening. Again, there's another thing that's just really interesting to like look at and be able to see, like, just how different switching around the editing and making a scene that's in the middle of this movie, the opening scene in a movie, how different. I don't know how it highlights that scene and changes the movie.
And Merrin's whole attitude in this movie is different than in Dominion 2, because in this movie he's like, he doesn't want to be a priest anymore. He's like, he's given up on it. Whereas in the Dominion, he wants back in. But in this one, he's always telling people like, I'm not Father Merrin, just call me Mr. Merrin, So, it is different. But it's tough to say, when watching like this movie and Dominion, like, it's kind of like, it goes back and forth as to what works and what doesn't work. And I think like a lot the changes in this movie do work, but a lot of them don't. So it kind of balances out a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, I really do enjoy this movie. It's not great. It's silly. It's ridiculous. It's maybe too violent, maybe too crude even for The Exorcism or for The Exorcist. But like, honestly, let's go back to that first film. Like, there's some really transgressive bits in that film for its time, right? Not so much here, but it's just so fucking funny. It's so stupid. It's like the bad movie that I can love. So I'm going to give it a 3. I'm going to give it 3 out of 5 for Exorcist the Beginning. What about you, Verno?
Sorry,
chewing on some ice.
Chewing on some ice.
He just gave it a 1.
I'll give I'll give it a 2.5. And I kind of want to watch it again because now like I said, I was struggling to connect with the characters, which makes it hard for me to follow the story. And that, that's everything. If you're not caring about the characters, it's hard to really lock in with it. But like I said, if I cared more about them, what happens is cool. There's a bunch of really cool, exciting moments in the movie, and like just gnarly set pieces. So it's entertaining enough. And then just to second what Brooke said, and I like it just as much in Dominion. But the Nazi bit, like that's just a really cool idea. This priest has to choose who dies, which I think was handled better in the second one overall, the way they flesh it out and do the whole scene. But that's just a really, really cool idea and a cool thing for your main character to be struggling with.
Yeah, and I like the Nazi bit in the beginning that they add in, right? Isn't it in the beginning where they talk about the main chick talks about how she was like raped by these Nazis or whatever, and her husband didn't want to like have sex with her again and shit like that. So, Fable, the basic story is this: the studio did some test screenings and they watched it themselves and they didn't like it, so they brought in people to fix it, and they were like, "Yo, instead of doing 2 weeks of reshoots to fix this movie, why don't we do 4 weeks of making a new movie?" And then they did. And they didn't do well. So they released the fucking Dominion no matter what.
They recast almost everyone but Alex Skarsgård, right? Is there anyone else that they reuse? I don't think so.
But the main general guy, right? Like they reuse him, don't they?
Okay.
I think they do. All right. So a 2.5, right, Verno?
Yeah.
That's fair. What about you, Brooks? What are you thinking?
Yeah, this movie's a 3 for me. It's all right. I think, it does have parts that I like, parts that I don't like. I guess you can say that about any movie. But I think, like, overall, as far as like the Exorcist lore goes, this movie is pretty unnecessary. But, it does give some flavor to the Father Marion character. So, I wouldn't say it's like completely, useless to the franchise. But, it's kind of a toss-up, like, I don't think like it and Dominion both need to exist, but at the same time, it is kind of cool that you have like 2 different like takes on the same kind of origin story. Mm-hmm. So yeah, this one it's all right. Certainly not the first one, but not too terrible either.
You know what we need? We need in just a few years we'll be able to just pump both movies into an AI program, and it'll just synthesize us a good one. It'll
give us the perfect version of both, right?
Alex Skarsgård won't even be in it somehow. We'll be like,
what I love is that like me and Brooks gave it the exact same rating, but I sounded way more enthusiastic about this movie than Brooks did. That's what I love about it, right? Oh yeah, so a 2.5 from Verno and a 3 from me and Brooks. Now, I don't own Dominion, the prequel to The Exorcist. I don't own that. It's hard to find the Blu-ray copy of this, right? There is a DVD out there you can get. So I just went and rented it from my buddy over at Big Mix Video. There it is right there because I wanted to watch it on physical media. This is the DVD. And real quick, free shout out. Hey everybody, Rockin' Robbie here, and I want to talk to you about Big Mix Vintage Video. Right now in Huntsville, Alabama, you can go and rent movies from an actual video store. Now this is run by my good homie of over 20 years, David. So go let him know that PCP sent you. This dude's got over 18,000 movies. That's right. He's got DVDs. He's got Blu-rays. He's got 4Ks. Hell, he's got VHS and Laserdisc. He's got an exceptional collection of your favorite filmmakers, your favorite film franchises, and he really specializes in hard-to-find unheard of horror movies. This dude is where it's at. He's my go-to source for those hard to get movies that I don't want to spend a freaking bundle on Amazon or eBay to get. It's just a nice old school kind of vibe when you go in. One of the best video stores I've ever been at. If you're in Huntsville, Alabama, go to 309 Dallas Street and check out Big Mix Vintage Video. Follow them on Instagram and Facebook, and you can email them at bigmixvintage@gmail.com. Major shout out to Big Mix Video. So thank you for renting that to me, which I found in the Paul Schrader section of the store, because there's a section for Paul Schrader. That's how cool his video store is. That being said, I found this movie really boring. Now, I know a lot of people seem to like this better than Exorcist the Beginning. They say it's more of a character study. They say certain things make more sense, even though the ending is fucking dumb. I thought the whole goddamn movie was dumb. I could not get into it, but I had just had such a fun thrill ride with Exorcist the Beginning. Then I went and I did like 2 shows in one day. I went on the road, went to Memphis, went to a con, drove back, got home late, and watched Dominion. So maybe that has something to do with it. I watched it at the end of a very long weekend, right? But I was not as invested. I did not care. I thought that Skarsgård's Mirren was literally like, I think he was underutilized in the film. I don't think the film was about him. I felt like a lot of it was on the nose with what was going on with like sparking this war between the members of the tribe and the members of the British military, and then you had the priests in the middle. Like, I don't know. I thought Exorcist the Beginning did it better, but it's also because neither of these movies are great or hold a candle to the original. So I appreciate a movie that knows it's not going to be The Exorcist or The Exorcist 3. So it doesn't want to be an Exorcist 2. So it just wants to be fun with like ridiculousness and sex and gore and violence. And I think that's why I like Beginning a little bit better, but Dominion falls a little bit flat for me. This was my first time watching it, but it is something I will watch again when I'm not rushed to do it, if that makes sense. What about you, Verna? What do you think about Dominion?
I'm glad you set it up like that, because I do think this is it's the type of movie that you don't want to watch in a rush. None of these movies are. Which, speaking of, I don't think this is the best franchise to watch the way we watched it either. It's not like, oh, I'm going to watch all the Friday the 13th movies this Halloween season. You don't need to watch these in a row. You can chip away at them one at a time. But I liked this. I actually was way more into this than the one before, for whatever reason. Like, we already mentioned it right from the opening scene. I was like, found it more engaging. Like, I just thought it was a cool, like, more gripping way to open the movie. And I definitely agree. Mirren is underutilized, and Alex Skarsgård, the whole thing. I'm like, I only really know him from the Marvel movies. I'm sure I've seen him in other shit, but I wasn't super impressed with him throughout both of these movies. I never felt like we really grew to like become close with Mirren, or like that I started to appreciate him as an actor. But I agree there's not much horror, but like what you said, it's more of a character study. The characters are way more interesting to me. I actually was a lot more into the situation going on between the Mirren's people, the British folks, and the Africans. Like, I was pretty into that, like that dynamic that was going on. The what's his name, Czech or Keshe or whatever, the guy that was possessed in this one, I thought he was way more interesting than the kid from the other one. Like, this guy, like, he looked cool with his disability, and then like when he turned at the end, I was way more into that one. I thought it was more atmospheric.
But he doesn't say juicy ass.
he could have dropped a juicy ass and it would have been cooler. It's not great, but I think it was almost like I started with, why can't I think of what the fuck the other one is called? I started with the prequel, the beginning, and I was like, oh no, like, this fucking franchise is gonna suck. And I was already starting to dread it. I'm like, I got so many more of these. And I was just like, instantly, I was like, this one is much easier to watch. And I enjoyed it a lot more. But it's not great. It's slow too.
Okay. By the way, you keep saying Alex Skarsgård. It's Stellan Skarsgård.
Oh, who the fuck is Alex? Is that
I think
brother?
that's the dude from True Blood, right?
I'm going to look it up.
Yeah, look it up. I think that might be the dude in True Blood. What about you, Brooks? What did you think about Dominion, prequel to The Exorcist, which was the first Exorcist at the beginning, and then they canceled it and then made a new one and then put it out fucking anyway, which is the very next fucking year, y'all, which is so crazy. What did you think?
It's like it was an odd experience. Like, cause I just watched. Like I watched them both in the same night. Like because I was trying to knock them out two at a time. I was trying.
Bro, that's gonna be weird. That's when I watched Godfather 3, both versions back to back, and was like, there is no fucking difference in that one. At least there's differences here, right?
Yeah, like at first I was like, man, like, is this gonna be like the same movie? But like it did eventually diverge and go a different way. But this movie feels a little more boring than the beginning in a lot of ways. Like there are things I appreciated about it a little bit more than the beginning, but I think the beginning probably tells the story a little bit better overall. Like it does feel like it streamlines it a little bit more, and it makes it just like But I think it takes away some of the flavor. I think that in the beginning. So yeah, it's still not bad. Like, but definitely, I think this is probably the weakest out of the franchise for me. Was this one?
I would agree with you.
Something to do, just with the fact that I've watched, basically the same movie with like a slightly different ending before.
Yeah, maybe there is something about watching Exorcist beginning first and then that, but Verno did the same thing. So like,
yeah,
I don't know. I'd like to watch Dominion on its own without like the whole franchise around it to see what happens. But as of now, after my first watch, it's my least favorite. I think it feels very much made for video. And I know that the movie wasn't completely finished, and they gave the director Schrader $35,000 more to kind of put it together or whatever. It had a very limited theatrical release, but it pretty much was direct to video. And that's what it feels like for me. I think it's weak. I think it's kind of whack. And I think it's lesser than Exorcist 2. So I'm going to give it a 2 digs out of 5. You out there in the chat, what do you give it? What do you think, Verno?
I think it is more than Exorcist 2 at the beginning. I don't know. For whatever reason, I was into it, but I can't disagree with anything that you guys have said. So I'll give it a 3. And I think that's just kind of how I am. I can get into a slow, boring movie sometimes if I'm in the right mood. This is like a daytime watch. This is like a Sunday afternoon kind of a watch, but I was into it.
All right. A 3 for Verno. What about you, Brooks? What are you thinking?
I'd probably for me, I'd probably give it 2.5. Like, I think it's not quite. It doesn't hit me quite as good as the beginning, but the beginning wasn't that great of a movie to begin with. But at the same time, I feel like it's kind of a toss up. Like maybe next time I watch, like maybe I would like this one more. Maybe I would like the beginning less. But on this watch, like, I just felt like, this one was the weaker of the two. So yeah, it gets like a -5 from the beginning for a 2.5.
All right. I gave it a 2. Verno gave it a 3. You gave it a 2.5. That's the third time tonight where we've been that far apart from each other, right? So pretty interesting to see our looks at the Exorcist franchise. One of my biggest regrets about the Exorcist franchise is that the 6th film that released last year, The Exorcist Believer, was not successful. And we won't get to see the trilogy that David Gordon Green had intentionally developed as this being the first part of it, right? I don't want to disparage anybody, especially here the week of Halloween, but there is a piece of me that really does hate modern horror fans because they love the 3 shitty ass Halloween movies this cat did, right? But they fucking hated this, and I fucking loved this more than any of those Halloween movies, right? And I was worried, I'm going to be honest with you, I was worried that when I watched this year, first time removed from my theater experience, that it would diminish a little bit, right? Especially compared with having just watched Exorcist and Exorcist 3 and hell, even Exorcist at the beginning with its juicy ass. You know what I'm saying? But I'm going to tell you this. It did not diminish. it actually elevated itself for me. I like this movie, I think, more now than I did a year ago when we talked about it on your channel, Verno. I fucking love this movie. I love its exploration of faith. That's what The Exorcist is about. The Exorcist is about faith and how people lose faith and what brings us back to our faith. Other fucking people. I love that it went out of its way to not just be a Catholic movie, but to introduce other elements, and not just to be a Catholic movie and also like this weird, I'm not saying it's like wrong or that it's racist, but like some of the other movies have a weird idea about like the tribal culture in Africa. You get what I'm saying there, right?
Totally, man.
This movie actually elevates, that's our word of the day. This movie elevates the idea of spirituality and how it relates to the rite of the exorcism and how it's actually older than the Catholic Church. I love that that shit gets brought in here. I love the fucking main character. He might be my favorite main character in any of these movies who's not a priest, right? Like, he's great. He's just caring about his daughter. And I feel like we get more about that in this movie than we do even in the first one. Now, does it touch the first one? Hell no. Does it touch part 3? Hell no. But is it better than the rest of them? Yes. Is it the third best Exorcist film? Yes. It is really fucking compelling. It is really good. I think it's resonating with its plot, with its themes, with its characterizations. The music is great. And we talked about how they don't like to use the tubular bells thing in any of these movies. This one, the moment he's on the road to find Reagan's mother, and they have their version of that fucking theme come in with the piano, I get chills watching that. I got chills in the theater last year, and I got chills again watching it.
I'm getting a boner right now. Just
right.
saying.
And then she shows up, and you're like, oh, she's about to Laurie Strode this bitch. Nope. She gets her eyes gouged out, bro. It's like fucking crazy. I would have loved it. This was the first of a planned trilogy: Exorcist Believer, Exorcist Deceiver, and Exorcist Redeemer, I believe.
Or Golden Retriever. It was up in there.
Yeah, right. It was going to be Air Bud Part 18, The Exorcist. But that's not going to happen now. And apparently Mike Flanagan is doing another direct sequel.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't know. I was kind of curious. I didn't know if he was going to pick up from where, because in the way I look at it, because I'm the only other person other than you, we'll find out about Brooks, that kind of loves this movie. And I was thinking, well, shit, this might work out great. We got this movie, which I'm happy with, if they keep these characters, and then they give it to Mike Flanagan, who's definitely proven like he can take big titles and big franchises and big names and do creative things with them. I think Mike Flanagan will make a really good Exorcist movie. He's safer than a lot of choices, but he's good. He's really good.
We can see, but David Gordon Green did a way better job with this than he did the Halloween movies, in my opinion. And Jelani, jokes on you. Linda Blair is in this movie, you asshole. So fuck you. All right. And we would have got more Linda Blair if this movie was successful. This movie is fucking good. I don't give a shit what anybody fucking says. I like it. What do you think, Verno?
It's crazy. I'm so excited to hear that, because I was a little nervous. Exactly the same thing. Saw it in the theater. I saw it twice in the theater because we were reviewing it on my channel, which you can go check out right now. And we're not right now, but when we're done, if you want some more Exorcist talk, feel free. But I was afraid, like, oh, I'm not going to like it as much. Or I was even thinking, like, oh, I graded it a little high at the time. I think I'll probably grade it a little bit lower. And then when I just watched it, first off, it's so engaging right off the bat. So much more than like most of these other movies. Almost all the other movies, like it grabs you quicker and you're connected to the characters more. The father and the daughter, the one that gets possessed, she's excellent. Both the girls that get possessed are amazing. It's got the good scares, it's good pace, super fucking watchable. It's more on the nose than most of these other movies. It's a little bit cheaper and maybe a little bit more dumbed down than an Exorcist movie should or could be. But it's just like, it's so much more engaging to me. And at the end, because I'm like, this is good. I mean, I'm enjoying the shit out of this movie. I like it just as much. And then at the end with the exorcism, the way it's like, it's stretched out, it's long, but it's paced out. There's a break in the middle, just like there's a break in the original exorcism. the priest with the neck snapping, and like it just builds up the choice that they make. I choose you, and I'm fucking tearing up by the end of it. I'm like, fuck yeah, like it's just as good as I thought, if not better. And here's the thing that's crazy. What's wild? I just 4.8 on IMDb, 22% on Rotten Tomato, 39% Metacritic, and a 49% Google user rating. What? I can't wait.
I fucking hate horror fans, man.
The only reason I wish there was more people on the panel is just so I could hear more opinions on this movie. I'll shut up now because I'm so curious what you thought, Brooks. I respect your opinion on things.
Yeah, well, thank you, Two Gun Pedro, for showing our review from last year. And I remember another thing that stands out to me that I mentioned last year: the only Exorcist film with an unsuccessful exorcism.
Yeah.
How was that going to be built into the next movie? Right? Like, with that they were going to pick up on the same characters, right? And one of these girls dies because her dad chooses her because he feels, and I love, dude, it's a build up to that moment. Like, he doesn't even want to do it. And he comes across as an asshole at first, honking the fucking horn. That's a bus lane. Get out of the fucking way. I love the sound design in this movie, how they're showing the fucking insanity and the oppressive nature of just life today, and how they're putting that in this movie. And they're setting up characters to be very cliche and then changing our opinions of them, like the neighbor who is the wannabe nun, the next door neighbor, right, with the trash cans, like
raped you out like a pumpkin.
Jesus fucking Christ, I love this fucking movie, man. Brooks, first time watching, very curious to hear what you think.
I thought this movie was all right.
I do that.
And that's like most of the franchise, I think, were all right movies. Like the first and the third one were undoubtedly the best, in my opinion. And the rest are like fine, serviceable. But like I think this one, I like this. I like how they're doing like something different with it. Again, while still keeping it like within the same kind of canon. Because you have characters coming back from the first movie. So like I like that they tie it in, but like they're doing a different thing. Like I like that the priest doesn't come in and save the day. Even the mother character, her coming back, she doesn't save the day either. Like it doesn't have that kind of, it doesn't have the more clean ending that you expect from an Exorcist movie. It actually requires a sacrifice. And like I wish they'd have done more with the demon. Like it does feel like it builds up like too slow, and like all of these movies feel like they're a bit too long for me. Like, not that I think it does pretty well with its time, but I feel like it could still have been cut a little bit to been a little smoother of a watch. But I think the characters are really good in this movie. Like it kind of like has like and I like the community, the idea that it isn't just one priest that can do this, right? Like the community has to come together. The community is the church. It doesn't matter about faith or like what you believe, anything like that.
And I love the idea that there's all these people of different faiths trying to do this, and the priest can't do it because the Catholic Church didn't like approve it. And they're all like, "Oh, we need a Catholic priest because they're the ones who." He shows up, he gets his fucking neck turned around, dude.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck, dude? Like, but what really started pulling through was the connection between the father and the daughter when he gives her the scarf from the mother. Oh my God, this movie breaks my fucking heart. So I watched this movie while my girlfriend was pregnant, right? And it hit me in a way, and now that it hit me in a different way, now that she successfully made it through the pregnancy. There's a beautiful fucking new girl in the world. Like, this hits me in a different way, dude. It really fucking does. I'm sorry. It really fucking does.
There's a look that the daughter gives her father, like after she's back. And I don't know, there's this look that they share that is so intimate and real. She is an amazing actress. I think the biggest shame of the whole thing is if they don't go forward with her in the next one, they're making a mistake. I mean, I guess it's cool that we have this, but that could have been cool. Either way, I want to see more of her in other
the precedent of every Exorcist prequel and sequel not having anything to do with the other one. The closest connected ones are Dominion and the beginning, right? Hell yeah. All right, let's rate this thing. So it's Horrorfest. We get a 0.5 leeway. I don't remember what I gave it last year. But this year, I'm giving it a 4.5. A 4.5, y'all. I think this movie is really fucking good. It is goddamn good, and it's a shame that y'all didn't like it as much as me, and we'll never get this trilogy completed, and we're going to get some bullshit Mike Flanagan stuff in a couple years, but I hope that's good. But this, to me, was better than Heretic, better than The Beginning, better than Dominion. That's not saying much, but I'll tell you what, this franchise as a whole is something I won't mind revisiting yet again. I like this franchise. I like this movie a lot. 4.5. What about you, Verno?
You know, I was leaning towards 4. The whole movie, I'm like, oh, this is a 4. I'm still gonna give it a 4 because that's what I gave it last year. I gave it a B. You gave it like a C at the time, so like a 3.5. You give me the courage to go 4.5 because I cried at the end. I always bump things up when it makes me, not that I was bawling, but I could have cried. Had I leaned into the emotion, I could have cried. Like it hit me that hard. Just a couple of things I wanted to mention about it. First off, in the first Exorcist, I don't think the exorcism works. It's like Plan B, the way it goes down at the end, where it jumps into Karras's body.
You're right.
So,
you're right. He's like, possess me, and he kills himself.
And they have to sacrifice.
Even in part
There's
3,
2 deaths.
even in part 3, you're right, because the exorcism doesn't work.
Doesn't work, yeah.
And he's like, he finally gets a little bit of control, and he's like, shoot me right the fuck now.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And dude has to shoot his friend who he just found out's alive after 15 years. Dude, those 3 movies, that's the Exorcist. There's 2 good Exorcist trilogies. There's 1, Ninth Configuration, and 3. Then there's 1, 3, and Believer.
So exactly. The other thing was just like the scale of it. Brooks, you kind of touched on it. This is the first one that kind of goes back. The other ones try to really expand the story. We're going to fucking Africa. We're doing this and that. This one keeps it simple again, just more of a family drama and small thing. And the other thing I wanted to mention, which I wonder what other people think of this, because it's, I guess, it's the type of thing that could be, it's like a taste thing, but the editing. Like, I really like the way that they're editing in this. The little bits with the whatever the fuck those things are that girls used to do in school and going back and forth, using that.
Those things. I fucking loved those things, dude.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool editing. So I love the movie. I'm glad you love it so much. I definitely want to buy it. You're making me jealous because I didn't buy it and I don't have that.
You could probably still get it with the slip because nobody cares about this movie.
No one cares, dude. So it's good. A 4.5.
I just bought it like 2 months ago, so like I'm sure that you can still get it with the slip, dude. That just goes to show you a movie that nobody cares about. What about you, Brooks? Where are you going to rate Believer?
Well, I didn't like this movie as much as you guys, but I think I give it a 3.5. Like I feel like, I kind of had a little bit of franchise fatigue watching this one too, so that might have affected. So like maybe down the line I like rewatch it like as a standalone and might like it better.
Yeah.
But having watched it alongside the rest of the movies, it feels like it's kind of falls into the 3.5 territory.
Hell yeah. 3.5 from Brooks, a 4.5 from me and Verno. And I see that Two Gun gave it a 4. So Two Gun, I knew there was a reason why I liked you, man. I knew there was a reason. So that's the franchise right there. So let's conclude it with this. What do you think about these 6 movies overall? We've done tons of franchises here. We've done Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, Hellraiser, Friday the 13th, Paranormal Activity, Saw. Like, we've done all this shit here. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's a more consistent franchise than that, which is the other franchise that every fucking sequel, except for part 2 in that one, ignores the previous movies. Like, It's so fucking weird how that works. Actually, it's very similar because no other Texas Chainsaw Massacre sequel acknowledges 2. So that's the same thing. The only movie that any of the sequels or prequels acknowledge in this or TCM are the original, which is wild to me. But my thoughts for the franchise are that it is, I wouldn't say it's a consistent franchise, but I would say that it's a franchise worth owning and worth watching and being on the rotation. It's not just about the first movie. None of them hold a candle to the first one, except for maybe part 3, which I think I like a little bit better. But that's probably just an element of pride right, inside of me because everybody else hates it. And I don't know, there's something inside of me sometimes where I'm like, y'all don't think Exorcist 3 is as good as the first one? Well, then I think it's better. Fuck you. What do you think about the franchise overall, Verno?
It's an interesting question. I would say if you asked me this like after watching the first couple, I would be like, this fucking franchise sucks just because they're longer, like I said. But I think overall it is really strong, and it's got. I guess I'll say it like this: I don't think I need to watch the prequels again. I don't see myself watching them unless I do it for a show or whatever. But like you said, you could pick your own little trilogies to make out of this. I could see myself watching 1, 3, and Believer again as like a group and sit down. But it's the ones that are good are really fucking good. Like as much as you and I love 1, 3, and 4, there's not too many franchises that I love 3 movies out of. Definitely not Texas Chainsaw. Maybe not even like Nightmare on Elm Street that I like 3 of the movies that much and that are that good. But I don't know. I don't know where it would rank. It's tricky to even put it up against the slashers and all that. It's harder to watch because of how long they are. Like I said, it makes
sounds like a.
It makes you less. You're less willing to want to sit down and watch them, like to binge them. But on the other side, all of these can be watched on their own, which is a plus too. You can just throw any one of them on in any order, and that's cool.
Yeah, I would say that's a great episode for Blood Splatter Chatter. What are the top 5 horror franchises of all time?
I want to do it, man. Definitely.
Yeah, let me be there for that.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I can spark some controversy. What about you, Brooks? What do you think about the franchise overall?
Well, I think, like, as a franchise, like, all the movies, like, the first movie is the only one that, I think is really a must-see, like, as far as, like, the franchise goes. But
we got to not have that kind of negativity. I mean, Exorcist 3 is the shit. I'm sorry. I drew a line in the fucking sand. I drew a line in the sand. I'm just kidding. I'm saying, what's up, Brooks? I'm sorry. Pazuzu got a hold of me.
Yeah, I don't feel like, any of the sequels are necessary, but at the same time, they do stand on their own in different ways. Like even 2, I kind of appreciate, just for how weird it is. So yeah, as a franchise, I think like, I don't think it was meant to be a franchise, but at least they try to do something different with it, each time. They don't try to like just consistently do the same thing, except with like, I think like the whole Dominion and Beginning, those 2 movies kind of cancel each other out and like kind of makes it feel like, unnecessary.
It's like a math problem. You're like, oh, these 2 problems cancel each other out. Okay.
Like a negative and a negative. Now it's a positive. What the hell?
Hell yeah.
So like not a terrible franchise, but the first one is definitely the only one I would say that would be a must watch.
Eric, you better calm the fuck down. You're about to cross some fucking lines. I'm just going to go say, man. Jaws is not a better franchise than fucking Exorcist. I'm sorry, dude. I'm so sorry. Why they've never remade Jaws? Think about that. Now that I've said that, we're about to get an announcement, I'm sure. All right, so I was very happy that I mean, in fact, now I want to actually own a copy of Dominion. So I have the franchise because I love horror movie franchises. I love the fact that we got a community of horror fans that love to keep these franchises alive. I really do. And Exorcist 3 is way better than most people fucking think. So there you go. All right, this concludes our review of the Exorcist franchise. But you know what? It's not over. We've had a nice horror fest this year. Well, we still got 2 more shows to go. Wednesday night. That's the wrong thumbnail. Is that the right thumbnail or the wrong one?
Close enough.
Close enough. Anyway, we'll be talking about the Ty West X trilogy on Wednesday over at Blood Splatter Chatter. And on Thursday night, Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers on Halloween. Super excited for that. Yeah. Verno, thank you for being here. Final thoughts, man.
Yeah, buddy. Yeah, this is. I think this will be my last time on PCP for Horrorfest, so it has been fascinating and fun as per usual. Again, yeah, go check out the Ty West trilogy. All the movies are streaming right there. Hey, there's the updated one.
Look how quick I work, man.
Very quick. Max Maxine is on Max. It just dropped. So if you haven't seen that one, go check it out. And Pearl and X, they're out there. They're on a Max and I think Netflix. And then on Sunday, I haven't put it together yet, but I'm almost positive me and Steph will be getting together on Sunday to talk about a couple new 2024 movies. Haven't locked it down yet, but one of them's probably going to be Don't Move, which is on Netflix, produced by Sam Raimi. It just came out. So him and I plan to, like, every couple weeks, maybe up until the end of the year on Sunday, we're going to be trying to catch up on all the 2024 horror movies to do a top 10 at the end of the year. So if you want to get your fix in and catch up on the best of 2024 horror, Sundays.
Hell
Blood
yeah.
Splatter.
Definitely awesome. What about you, Brooks? Thank you so much for being here. Any final thoughts?
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that me and Jelani did Go Figure reviews. And recently we did a video where we did a live stream and Halloween special. And we talked to Mark Spears for a little while, which was fun. And I forgot to mention last time, but Jumpin' John Jehoshaphat Horny Tom Holshoe was also with us. So I felt bad that I'd forgotten to mention him in the yesterday. So I'm remedying that error. But watch Go Figure reviews. The power of Christ compels you. Yeah, there's a giveaway thing.
There's a giveaway. You got to go to this video. Somebody throw a link out there in the chat, please. They're giving away a Cobra Ferret. You got to be a subscriber. You got to comment with hashtag Ferret500, and there's got to be 30 comments in order for the video to qualify.
Yeah.
So go check that out.
Hell
There you go, Jelani. Thank you so much, man. Thank you so much. I love how Jelani's like, I can't be there for the Exorcist franchise review.
Yeah.
But I'm going to be in the comment the whole time to shit on it, even though I've only seen 2.5 of the fucking movies. So
be gone. The power of Christ compels you. Be gone.
All right. So Horrorfest is wrapping up. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. But join me and Verno and the crew over at Blood Splatter Chatter for the X trilogy from Ty West. Very excited for that. And then it all ends on Halloween night. Halloween 4, the return of Michael fucking Myers. Y'all, this has been the best Horrorfest of all time, in my opinion. We've had some of the greatest shows, some of the best panelists, and in my opinion, the bloodiest, most transgressive Horrorfest lineup of all time. We'll catch you Wednesday night over at Blood Splatter Chatter. Y'all, stay spooky. Pop, pop, boo. Your mother sucks cocks in hell.